This is Castle 1.
Castle 1. Cassie, we've got to get right hand in. Copy that, copy that.
That's my drive and turning.
Max speed straight ahead. Perfect angle. Perfect angle. Perfect angle.
Still gaining on the lay line there. Gaining on the lay line there. All boats are below us in the box.
Hey, the speed here, guys. Good pressure this way. Good pressure this way.
You're looking at 10.5 to 42.
5s at 42.
Hello, podcast listeners. Welcome back to the second part of our chat with American match racing legend, America's Cup winner, Ed Baird. If you're tuning in without having first listened to part one, then you know what I'm going to say. Go back and give Ed's early career a listen first. It is well worth it. In that first episode, we spoke to Ed about breaking onto the star-studded match racing circuit and making enough of a name for himself to be drafted in as part of Russell Coutts's Team New Zealand for the 1995 San Diego Cup. Coming up, we have a whole host of Cup chat. Ed started his Cup career as a coach with Team New Zealand, then helmed for the Challenger Series of the 2000 Cup. That's a fascinating story. And he commentated on a Cup for one edition and then had a much more successful run at the trophy in 2007. Before we get on to all of those details, if you are enjoying the podcast, then please do head over and show your support at buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It is dead easy, and your support allows us to stay ad-free so we can keep on delivering these uninterrupted stories. If you've already done so, then a huge thanks. And so, back to Ed. He's just helped coach Team New Zealand to victory in San Diego, and with the Cup World heading south to Auckland, Ed was hoping to build a team of his own.
You can get a lot more done if you're not on the water all day as the CEO, and you can get a lot more done if you're not worried about raising money as the sailors. You could see the waves coming, and we hopped up out of the water and smashed down on the next wave, and the boat broke in half. We started to hoist the main, and we could see the giant slashes of where chafing for 2 days of having 3 reefs in had cut through the sail.
The Cup, Ed, would now be heading to Auckland. How much did you want to be part of it, and how did that eventually come about?
For the 2000 Cup, I remember having a conversation with Peter Blake when Russell first hired me to work for Team New Zealand in '95, and I stood in front of his desk and said hello. It was the first time I'd met him, and he said, "I understand that you want to put your own team together. If we're successful, that you want to put your own team together." And I said, "Yeah, nothing would make me happier than to bring a team to Auckland and having been successful with you, and then to take it off of you." And he said, "Okay, well, good luck with that." But he knew from day one that was my goal, and I learned a lot from the team. And we went away, and we put a team together with Young America that was Newe York Yacht Club, and came to Auckland with a pretty good program, I think. And we really had a long, hard experience of getting to Auckland, which was really rewarding. Learned a lot, got a lot of good racing in, developed some amazing boats, and got there and had some good racing, and we were doing quite well. But I remember very clearly
we're going to get to that
next
in
part
a
of the
minute.
story.
I know where you're going, but let's wind it back a little bit. I mean, describe the ambition of the New York Yacht Club's Young America campaign. How did you feel about taking on that leadership role?
Well, it was a great honor for me, obviously, to be part of the team that had for so long held the Cup. But I think it was also one of those things that was really misunderstood in most of the world's minds, that the Cup had been gone since '83, and then had come back to San Diego, and then had gone back now to New Zealand. And that's a long, long time in people's minds. And the New York Yacht Club had some people involved in it that were huge supporters and wanted to go back and try to win this America's Cup back and be involved. And there were a lot of people in New York Yacht Club that just didn't know much about that history, and they were there for other reasons. So the support was a little bit fractured. They got us what we needed. We got the budgets, we got the stuff that we had to have, but it was a hard job to do that. And along the way, we had to make some critical decisions that, if we'd had a little bit more funding, which is what the world thought we did. The world thought we were unlimited, open checkbook. If we'd had that, we would have been a fair amount stronger. But we really were trying hard to make it work with a budget that was less than what we needed. Tough, but great, overall support, and the club was super excited for the team. We had a lot of support of people that came to be with us, both in the U.S. and back in New Zealand when we were there. So yes, and I mean, not in any way trying to say that the club wasn't supportive. They were. It was just different. It was quite different than what the world believed it was.
And it was a different role for you. I mean, it's hard graft, an America's Cup campaign, isn't it? There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things to get right, and a lot of people to keep happy. Describe what your life was suddenly like the boss in charge of it all.
Well, I think, Shirley, that's one of the things that changed dramatically in those few years between 83 and 2000. In 83 and before, you had the teams that were run by Dennis Conner or Harold Cudmore, and they did the fundraising themselves, and they went racing themselves, and they kind of ran the design parts, and pushed those guys along themselves, and they were the CEO of the teams. And now for the 95 really changed that, with Peter Blake running the team, and Russell and his guys, Brad Butterworth and his group, running the sailing part of it. And that separation of powers became very important, because you can get a lot more done if you're not on the water all day as the CEO, and you can get a lot more done if you're not worried about raising money as the sailors. And that was where we were now. So my role really wasn't, I'm the big boss. My role was running the sailing side of things. John Marshall was the big boss. He was the team, leader. And of course, he had been successful in several cups with Dennis Conner and so forth, and was a very well-respected New York Yacht Club member, and knew a lot of the people that we needed to get raise money from. So he was great at that. And he was a very technically oriented guy who understood the design side. Again, great at that, along with Bruce Farr, who at the time was the world's leading, big boat designer. So, my job was to put a sailing team together and to go out and make sure we knew how to sail.
It did also provide a real opportunity, didn't it, for a lot of American young talent. When I spoke to the American coach, Tom Burnham, who credits that moment when you called him up as, his big opportunity, a door into the America's Cup, and, was then fast-tracked, I guess, as part of the Ed Baird match racing school. But so many talented names came from that and then raced with you. Yeah.
Well, we had a great mix of people that had done 2 or 3 cups already, the Stu Argos and the Kimo Worthingtons, and people that had done things like the Whitbread race, what is now the ocean race. And these were important people to have on the team, so that you could make sure your equipment was the best that it could be. It wasn't going to break, but it wasn't too heavy, and it wasn't overbuilt, all those sorts of things. Very important in the America's Cup stuff. And so yes, it was a special time, special moment. And I can't tell you, there's not a single person on that team that I'm not still friends with these days.
So you went to Auckland, but doing okay, but pretty early on in the Challenger Series, you were about to get a real dose of America's Cup reality, weren't you? I mean, describe for us what happened on that fateful day on the Hauraki Gulf.
You mean on November 9th, 1999? Yes, we raced in a northeasterly, which had some big waves. Wasn't that windy. It was sort of 15 to 18, but big waves coming in off the ocean. And we raced on the outer course in the Hauraki Gulf. And the very top of that course was where the water depth changed from about 60 feet, and it dropped quickly down to about 140. And the second time around the track, racing against Peter Gilmore and the Japanese team, we were leading, and we needed to tack and sail for probably 12 boat lengths to get to the ley line and tack again and go around the mark and sail down to the finish to win. And we had just dropped off that bank, and we experienced a set of waves like I haven't seen before that just suddenly were really steep and really close together, and we had to tack. We were at ley line. We had to go. And I remember, as the navigator, Ed Adams, was saying, we got to tack, we got to go here, we got to tack. And I said, okay, it couldn't be a worse time. And I started turning the boat. You could see the waves coming. And we hopped up out of the water and smashed down on the next wave, and the boat broke in half. And that was as much as we fought and tried and nearly made it work. That was the moment that kept us from going forward into the semifinals, unfortunately. So,
you told it very wonderfully and matter of factly, but the boat literally did break in half. And listeners should definitely Google. There's some amazing pictures of it. I mean, for you'd led that project. You'd brought this team of people together. You'd been involved, I'm sure, in the design process and everything. I mean, how heartbreaking, how difficult was that moment? It
wasn't heartbreaking and difficult until weeks later. At that moment, it was like, okay, we got a problem, we got to fix it. Here we go, let's get into it. And the guys worked so hard to get that right, but time was against us. So it was tough. And weeks later, you suddenly look back and realize, oh, that was the brutal moment, And if we'd have just recognized that it was even possible that it could happen, we just would have not worried about the finish in that race. I mean, if we knew what was going to happen, you just would have eased the sails out, slowed down, sailed, backed off, and not worried about whether you were going to finish or not. Just got through that little rough patch and then moved on. But we didn't know the boat was that close to the limit, and we didn't realize the waves were that powerful, and it's just none of us had ever broken a boat in half before. I don't think it's ever going to happen again. I hope. So it was rough.
You're about to do the Fastnet this summer. Let's not tempt
But I
fate.
am touching wood as we speak. So.
Not the America's Cup you'd hope for, but as you said, lots of lessons and a lot of friends. And it's fair to say, Ed, as your career was drawing on, I mean, you were really in demand, whatever the discipline, and you actually took part in 2 ocean races, round the world races, with Knut Frostad. I mean, how much did you enjoy that kind of racing? It seems a long way from what you'd done before.
Yeah, the ocean racing is a long way from what I typically do, and frankly, I found it less enjoyable. It was a great learning process and opportunity, and of course, another way to be part of a team where you meet some wonderful people that are really amazing at what they do. And I learned a lot about weather and the oceans and what's out there and the things that happen, even though there's not land around and so forth. But I found that it was less satisfying because it took so long to get a result, and then you only got one result. I liked it when you got 5, 6, 7, 8 results a day. I don't want to go for 2 weeks and just get a 4th place. That's not, we were in 4th place after the first day and it stayed that way. That's not as much fun for me. And that's just me. The people that love offshore really love it for different reasons. I'm looking for being satisfied that we did our job well. And, that some of that is just not there on the long races.
A few of today's Cup sailors have raced the Volvo, the ocean race. I mean, Pete Burling, Blair Tuke, Luke Parkinson, of course. And back in the day, guys like Grant Dalton would argue he put Whitbread's ocean races ahead of the Cup in his order of priority. Yeah, how transferable do you think the skills are?
Yeah, it's different. I mean, it's just different. You got to know your equipment. You got to know the when to rein things in. You got to understand weather. You got to plan. You have to look out, 3-4 days ahead to position yourself for the next weather change. You got to know your people and your team and work well with them. And then you have to be able to get some rest when it's the right time to get some rest. These are all skills that are really valuable, and they apply to inshore racing too, just in a different way. So yeah, I mean, I can understand that about Grant Dalton. And here's one: he and Peter Blake both are some of the great planners of the world. And Peter Blake used to be just planning out 2 years ahead. I was like, wow, I'm barely a couple of weeks ahead if I got a plane ticket to go somewhere. It's just a different way of thinking, and that's why I enjoy the little quick, short match races. Just bang, bang, get her done and find out, and then do it again.
What about the modern approach to offshore? Have you got thoughts on that? It's pretty divisive, isn't it? Sailing indoors on foiling and mockers. What do you think of it all? It is different. When I watch we watch them sailing, looking out the window at the sails and pushing buttons. Again, you're playing the game. It's just in a different piece of equipment. That's not for me. I don't enjoy being inside boats that long. In the first place, let alone doing all of my jobs from inside. I like being out in the fresh and feeling it and seeing it, and I like to see what's coming and not have to be guessing 2 days out. That maybe we're going to get a cold front or maybe we're not. You have had plenty of success offshore, haven't you? I mean, you raced the grueling Sydney to Hobart in 2000 on board the Maxi Nicorette. Actually, I've raced on Nicorette. We had a fire. Which I'll never forget. And what do you remember of that race? Line honours, I think. We did. We got line honours and we won overall. I remember a couple of things, and I'll start at the end of the race. I remember that as we sailed into the Derwent River down there towards the end, we were reaching in, and we had 55 knots at the top of the mast. We had a number 5 and 3 reefs. And suddenly the tack of the number 5 jib blew up, and the sail just zippered out of the headfoil and went off around behind us. So here we are in 50 knots of wind with the jib sheet and the halyard hanging on the thing. It's shaking like crazy. The mast and the boat are just they're convulsing, and we can't bear away to collect it because it's too shallow downwind of us. So ultimately we ended up having to cut the sail away, which we didn't want to do, but we were going to lose a lot more than the sail if we kept doing what we were doing. Then we finally get into the finish line, and it was very light air, and we went to hoist our main back up out of the reefs because our boat was standing up, and we started to hoist the main, and we could see the giant slashes of where chafing for 2 days of having 3 reefs in had cut through the sail. And it was just going to look like it was going to look like something out of Waterworld, the movie with Kevin Costner. And we're just like, maybe we should just keep the reef in and have it look at least some, good. So we finish, and they run us over to this podium, and they're all excited to see us, and the TV cameras are going. It's 3 a.m. And we're all standing there on the podium, just sort of, wow, we made it, and they're giving us the award for being first to finish. And it started to snow. And I was like, I'm not sure about this offshore stuff. It's not really my thing. The snow, really? So that was kind of crazy. But, for me, that race was interesting. I enjoyed the first
16, 18 hours where there was a lot of tactics and things going on. And then the southerly buster came through and the waves got huge, and I didn't feel very well for quite a while. And that wasn't able to help sail the boat for probably 18 hours. And then we finally tucked in underneath Hobart or Tasmania and started to get smoother again. And I started to feel better, and I came up, and then I was able to help again. And then, of course, we lost the sail in the river, and all that kind of stuff happened. Then it snowed, and it's just, yeah, it's definitely a memory. So thankful that we were able to win, and I don't have to go back.
You're not selling it.
No.
Let's go back to the America's Cup, shall we?
Yeah.
So back in the Cup, at the peak of your career, and in 2003, with the Cup World focused on a very well-attended event in Auckland, you were without a team, but you still had a role, didn't you? Let's talk through that. What were you doing in the 2003 Cup?
Well, 2003, I looked around for opportunities with other teams, and just nothing that was available made sense. And so I ultimately wasn't going to sail. And but I did talk to the television folks about maybe I could help, because I had done a little bit at the 2000 Cup right at the end after we were eliminated. I helped out a little bit there, and it was good. So they were kind enough to invite me to come down and work with Peter Montgomery, who, for anybody in the sport, knows he's the voice of yachting, and he's the guy that you hear on all the movies saying, and that's the America's Cup, for whoever just won it. And I mean, he was amazing. And we rode around on the North Star, which was the Terry Kohler's big power boat that was the only boat that was allowed to be inside the race course, because we were producing the television coverage. And we got to listen to every race. I got to watch every start, every mark rounding, every tack and jibe. And I got to be there for every event that happened during the America's Cup lead up, all the Louis Vuitton series, and then the Cup itself. And again, it was just a huge learning process. I mean, I learned a tremendous amount with Team New Zealand in '95, and this was at least equal. I mean, to listen to the afterguards talking through what they were going to do next, and what they were thinking, and who was doing what, and how it was going, and what the timing was. All these things were just fascinating to me, and I absorbed it all, and was like, I got to be able to get back involved here. So that was great fun, though. Boy, I learned so many things.
It is quite a privilege. I mean, particularly now, because we've so many cameras and comms. To sit in the booth and listen to it all is. It's pretty special. I mean, I'm curious about what it was like working with PJ Montgomery. As you say, he's an absolute legend of America's Cup commentary. His one-liners, I mean, particularly at the wins, which I know he's written in his little notebook, but they're just so iconic, aren't they, and spot on.
Yes, and he does plan and prepare very well, and he's an iconic announcer. And knowing that, at the beginning of what we were doing, I said, Peter, I've done a little bit of this, but what's the thing I can do most to help you out? And he said, he pointed off to Takapuna, and he said, you see over there on that hill? He said, you see that little white house next to the red house? And I said, yeah. He said, pretty sure there's a grandma living up in that house who's looking out here saying, there's some sailing going on. I wonder if it's on the telly. And turns it on, and said, sure enough, there's an America's Cup going on in her backyard. And she's looking at the TV and wants to understand what's going on. And if you can help her know what's happening on the race course, then you've done your job. And I was like, okay. So now I've got this image in my head, silver-haired, 85-year-old woman on the watching the television, and that's who I was talking to for the whole event. And Pete was just great. He would encourage me every day and was really helpful. But he did scare me. I mean, the first time we sat down and started to do a broadcast, it was all great. I'd known him for a lot of years. We had talked and done all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it was time for the broadcast. And boom, this Pete Dick Montgomery is in the house. And I was like, whoa. I mean, I just went over and shied against the window and was like, is it going to be like this all the time? But he was so exciting and so fun to have. What a great voice for television, and always paying attention and making it fun.
Yeah, fabulous. What was that like, though, personally, I wonder? Sort of on the outside, but obviously also slightly on the inside. I mean, how charged was it in Auckland? You know, Alinghi, all those Kiwi stars on board, winning the cup, stealing it, I guess, from the home team.
Well, it was definitely fun to watch. It was interesting to watch because there was a lot going on behind the scenes, like you say, with the, Russell and the Alinghi team having, a fair amount of New Zealand talent on board and having the New Zealand public being pretty unhappy about that at the beginning. And then later it got a little better. But I mean, those guys they were having tomatoes thrown at them at as they left the harbor and stuff, and it was rough. But for me, it was really fun to not have the pressure of preparing for the racing, and yet be right in the middle of the racing and be able to pick up what was going on, and then ask about it. I went to all of the umpire debriefs and listened to what the discussions were. I went to the press conferences and listened to all the things that were going on. Without really being the person in the room that had to come up with the great answer or anything like that. And of course, all my friends were on the teams down there, so I got to see a lot of those guys all around town and visit. It was a little bit hard because it was a long period without my family and, being away without my own team. So it was just a little bit lonely because you're not part of the racing side of it. And of course, the television guys are just head down making the broadcast happen all day long. So when they're done, they're just exhausted. So it was a little funny that way. But great experience overall.
I like that you're telling everybody how hard we work in television. That's good. Keep that up.
Billionaires think differently and faster than the rest of us. Nobody tried to pretend that I was Swiss or Brad was Swiss. We were there to help this team be successful. And that's all we wanted to do. The last court decision postponed the event by a few months, and that was the time that Oracle needed to finish developing their wing.
So Alinghi win the cup, big shock, and the next cup would now be in Europe. Valencia eventually picked as the venue. Russell Cook's all set to defend on behalf of Alinghi. So what happened next?
Well, yeah, something happened, and Russell got unhappy and stopped coming to work, basically. And the team continued forward. Brad Butterworth and Grant Zimmer pushing it forward and making it all come together with Ernesto. But, they were missing Russell, and they were expecting him to come back. I mean, they continued for like a year this way, expecting that, okay, he'll come back and get back with us because, it's his team and it's all his guys, but he didn't. And, a couple of years before the Cup, they're suddenly realizing that, maybe he's not going to come back. They decided that they had Jochen Schumann and Peter Holmberg as the drivers for the two boats, but they wanted to have a third. They wanted Jochen to run the sailing program, and they wanted to have a third driver that was able to rotate in and not just be the pressure on Jochen every day. And so I was at the Swedish match race in Marstrand, Sweden. What would that have been? 2004, and Peter Holmberg, we just got done racing each other, and he came by and we were talking about the race, and he said, "Hey, Brad Butterworth asked me to ask you what your plan was for the next Cup," and I said, "I really haven't thought about it. I just got done doing the TV, and I really didn't know what was going on with the teams." And he said, "Well, he wants you to give him a call." And I said, "Okay." So I called Brad, and he said, "We'd like you to come and talk to us." So I think it was maybe September. I went to Valencia, and there was one of the acts was going on, and I went to talk with Brad and the team, and they asked me if I'd come and work with them. So I was, of course, thrilled to do that. And in March of 2005, I moved over there with my family, and we were there for 2 years.
How did you end up steering the boat? 3 helmsmen. I mean, what was the dynamic there? How did that work?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think it was all pretty good for a long, long time. Obviously, at the very end, when choices were made, it got difficult. But again, for me, it was like match racing with umpires. We weren't fighting each other because we weren't the ones who had to come out on top in somehow of our own discussions. There was a group that was in charge of deciding how we were going forward. They had nothing to do with the 3 of us that were sailing the boat. So we all just worked hard together to try and improve the team every day. And I think it was a few months before the Cup where Jochen was told, "We really want you to focus on the team and the people, and you're not going to be driving in the Cup, but we want you to your job is incredibly important, and we want you to focus on it." And then it was it was a couple of weeks before the Cup when they told Peter Helmberg that they were going to let me drive the boat, and he was unhappy for a day. I mean, he was angry, as you would be when you get that information. But he came back and said, "Okay,
let's make it happen." And you did make it happen. Famously, of course, you won that Cup.
Yeah.
Defended in Valencia, and you were a Cup-winning helm. Describe that feeling, that realization that you'd done it.
Again, it's my approach to the sport has always been I'm part of the team, and it's just not something that I think, wow, I won the Cup. That's not what happened. The team won the Cup. I'm part of it. It was the same thing in '95 when I was part of Team New Zealand. I didn't drive the boat, but I was part of the team, and it was a great honor. And I honestly, for people who watched the Valencia Cup and watched the last race in particular, you'll remember that we led at the last windward mark. We had a penalty on Team New Zealand, and we're just going down to the finish line. So all we got to do is defend starboard tack, so that if they gain on us, they don't get right away on us somehow. So they jibed away, and we went for a little bit and jibed away too. And now the 2 of us are sailing towards the finish line on starboard, and we're well ahead. And the wind shifted like 120 degrees forward to where we were suddenly beating in light air to the finish line.
We're going to interrupt Ed there and bring you a little glimpse of that famous Cup match finish with the legendary Peter Montgomery on the microphone, and a 1-5 match poised at 4-2 in Alinghi's favour. Team New Zealand are a matter of boat lengths from the finish, but they have a penalty turn to complete.
Here goes Team New Zealand. They're coming down, Alinghi out to the left. Team New Zealand, can they accelerate? Yes! Yes, can they do it? They're getting up. We need a high shot to be able to see it. Team New Zealand coming down. Alinghi's going to get there. Alinghi have done it. Alinghi have won by 2. The 3rd of July 2007, and the America's Cup stays in Europe.
It's an amazing finish. And in the context of our guests staying calm on board Alinghi, that was the moment Ed Baird steered the Swiss boat to a successful defence of the Cup. But it wasn't an easy win.
We broke our spinnaker pole before we could get the spinnaker down and the jib up. They were having all kinds of issues, and they got past us just by a little bit and had to do a penalty. And then they did the penalty right on the finish line, as you would, and then tried to turn back and finish. And in that time, we coasted through to leeward and passed them again to win by just over a second. And it was the time, there was that moment really, I wasn't thinking about me or the cup or anything. I was actually fascinated that I learned that the billionaires think differently and faster than the rest of us. Because when you finish a match race, they put up your flag, yellow or blue, for whoever won. You know, bang, there's the gun, and then the flag goes up. And when we finished, I think we were the yellow flag that day, and the woman on the bow of the boat who was being told which flag to put up, she had both of them, she twitched and started putting the blue flag up. And I was like, no. And then she looked and saw what she was doing, put it back down, and raised the yellow flag all the way up into the air. And as she was doing that, Ernesto threw his arms in the air and was like, woohoo! And the rest of us still needed another 2 seconds to process it. So that was the moment that I realized why he was in charge of the whole thing, and he's so good at what he does. But it was a really fun moment, and what an amazing team. Just incredible group of people. It was really impressive.
It's a fantastic race, isn't it? You can watch it on YouTube if anyone wants to see it. My son's a big match racer, and quite often we watch that. It is quite unbelievable, a race that long to come down to a second.
Yeah.
Ed, you were obviously an American athlete sailing for a Swiss team, a topic that's very much in the news at the moment. There's obviously big benefits for nations to go abroad, isn't there, for sailing talent? I mean, some think that that's wrong. Where do you sit on all of that as someone that's won the Cup for Switzerland?
Well, I find it interesting because, I'm sure everybody knows the saying that you have to be from out of town with a briefcase to be an expert, right? And the American opportunities that I have had have been very limited. With the exception of the 2000 Cup with the New York Yacht Club, the teams that were there were either filled with people who had been doing it for a long time and they didn't want anybody new, or they were run by somebody who was doing all the fundraising but was also driving the boat, and he didn't want somebody like me to come and threaten. I mean, for whatever reason, there were not very many opportunities to race for American teams. So I was lucky enough to be able to go sail with New Zealand, even though I couldn't race in the race. I was able to sail the boat every day for 2 years. And I was able to come and be part of the Swiss team because the nationality rules allowed it at that point. But imagine if the Swiss team had never been allowed to bring anyone from outside. They probably never would have started in the first place. Or if they had, they certainly would have struggled. They just don't have the depth of talent that is needed to compete against the big nations. And that's part of why the U.S. had the Cup for so long. And going way back to our discussion about the Olympics, same thing. That's part of what the Olympic thing was. America just had the bulk of the talent because we had so many people. But in the smaller countries, struggled. But in the recent iterations of the Cup, there's been a number of times where you can bring in people from outside. And while I disagree with trying to pretend that person is from your country, which is a little bit what the U.S. has done for a couple of these times, where they've said, this guy's got he married an American woman and he's got a green card, he's really American. No, that's not really what we're thinking about here. But nobody tried to pretend that I was Swiss or Brad was Swiss. We were there to help this team be successful. And that's all we wanted to do. So it's an interesting perspective, and I think that it gets a lot of emotion going with people that want it to be a certain way. But the reality is, think about the football sport. How many people on the Liverpool team are actually even English, let alone from Liverpool? But that's your team. If you love that team, that's your team. And if you love Manchester United, then that's your team. But where are the people from? Certainly in the U.S. on our baseball teams, the football teams, the rugby, the basketball, people from all over the place. And if the sport is professional, I think that you end up having to do that, or you're going to be left behind by the big, powerful places where the money is,
What do you make of the modern cup scenario? I mean, what did you think watching the foiling AC-75s tearing it up in Barcelona?
I think that the boats are fascinating and incredible. And however, I think that it's a totally different game than it was just a few years ago. The speed, the length of the race, the boundaries, all these things they make for a whole different race course. And that's not good or bad. It's just different. And it's not the part of the sport that I love. I watch the guys looking like they're playing video games and managing the ride height and all the buttons and all, I don't know that I would be any good at that, which is a shame because, somebody who's in my same position but is 20 years old, the 20-year-old me right now might not ever get to experience the really great parts of the sport if this is where it continues to go off to. So it's interesting. I watch the racing. I think it's wonderful. It's the boats are truly incredible. When they first said we're going to have this boat that's going to look like a water bug and it's going to have arms that go up and down and it's going to fly in the air, I was like, you're insane, But look at what we got, right? It's working, and technology has made that. There's people who never imagined that you could shoot a rocket out into space and have it come back down and get caught by a pair of chopsticks on the launch pad either. And here we are with, that's happening. So interesting stuff. But I'm also equally interested to see where it goes in the future.
Let's go back to Alinghi. Post that win in Valencia, things went bad for a while. What was your involvement in that whole deed of gift scenario, in and out of court? And as someone that had just lifted the trophy, how frustrating was it all? Oh,
it was very frustrating. We had a huge amount of interest from around the world for a lot of teams to be involved in the next cup, and a big part of what these teams as a group said they wanted was to limit the number of boats and equipment and all these things that they had to build. And they were really happy to have like one boat. We'll all do one. Okay, here we go. So the process was well in place to try and make that all happen. But of course, we all look back and know what the history is, that the courts decided that the Spanish Yacht Club wasn't correct under the deed of gift to be able to host the cup, and then it got to be a new challenger. Unfortunately, the new challenger really, which was Oracle, at the beginning they said, it's okay, we're going to still have a big event, all these other teams and all this stuff, and then with time that sort of all faded away, and they finally said, you know what, we're not going to have a challenger series, we're just going to have one boat, and this is what we're going to do. So, and fighting that in the courts was kind of crazy because we never knew what we were actually getting ready for. If we would win in the court and it would go our way, then we're back to getting ready for having all these teams and having one big monohull, and we're going to go get that ready. And so let's get the design guys thinking about that. Let's get the resources poured into that. And then if we lose in the court, it would be, well, we're going to sail some giant multi-hull. Let's think about that. And that went back and forth, back and forth. So we never really knew, what we were going to do. But of course, on Oracle's side, they did. They knew the only thing they were going to do was the boat that they ended up winning the cup with. So they kept pushing forward the whole time. And unfortunately, it was just one back and forth too many, because I think in the end, the way it felt to us was that the last court decision postponed the event by a few months to when it actually happened. And that was the time that Oracle needed to finish developing their wing. And that was that really, in my mind, was the difference between the teams. I think that had they raced with their soft sails, I'm pretty confident that we would have been faster around the course, and we would still have retained the cup at that point. But we'll never know. They won in the court and on the water, and that's where it is.
But what was your involvement during that?
Well, my job was to learn how to sail multi-hulls. So, I mean, I ended up racing against you a little bit as well as others in the extreme 40s. We went off on some big trimarans and tried to learn a little bit about how they worked and what was going on. And just, I went up to Geneva and sailed in the D35s that they had up there on the lake. Just trying to learn about what it takes to make a bigger multi-hull go well. Of course, nobody had ever sailed a boat like what we built, so that we were never going to know exactly how that was going to behave. And it was pretty cool when it was done. But, as time went by, it became more and more clear that Ernesto was pretty excited to actually sail the boat, and he was very capable. So, he went out and did that. So my job became more of a coach again. And, we worked on things like in the simulator, just trying to set up scenarios and figure out timings and just give the playbook out to the team.
I covered that Dita Gift match, and I always remember Ernesto at the end, completely broken, and then I guess stepped away from the cup for a long time. I mean, personally, it was hard, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, he said, for that event, that if we were successful, we'd keep going, and if we weren't, he was done. And I applaud him. I think he's done a tremendous amount for the sport over the years. A lot of people don't know his history, and you should Google it. It's amazing. Way back to the Maxi boats that he put a fleet together so that people could learn how to sail Maxi boats and have a circuit to sail them on. But he's been in the sport for a long, long time and done a lot of wonderful things, and it's really cool.
What's your relationship like now with the trophy? I mean, a winner, of course, but when you think about it, how do you feel about the cup?
Well, it's an incredible honor to be part of that history. I mean, it really is. Just from a kid looking at all these people that when they would go and race in this event and somehow win for the U.S., and then being able to be involved in teams that did win, it is amazing. But it's for me, that chapter is over. And now it's really, what's the next project? What's the next thing that we can learn about? What's the next team that we can have fun, on an experience with? So for me, it's always been about just racing and doing the best you can, and taking steps forward. It hasn't been about targeting one particular thing. And again, back to the Olympic discussion. Yeah, I was involved in 6 Olympic campaigns. Never went to the Olympics. But without that process, I never would have been successful in the other areas. Same thing, without the America's Cup, never would have been able to do some of the things that I've done since, which is really just so lucky in the sport. That it is an amazing sport that way, that it gives you tremendous different opportunities to go out and compete.
You've done a lot of sailing, Ed Baird. I mean, the simplicity of the laser, the combative challenge of match racing, the giant teams of the Cup, the Grand Prix circuit. We haven't even talked about the TP52s, have we? The power of Maxis. I mean, even, as you say, competing on multi-hulls in the Extreme 40 circuit. What's been your favourite? If I told you moving forward you can only sail one boat, what would it be and why?
Oh, my Lord, I could have no idea. Other than if I was only going to do one kind of racing, I don't know that I would pick the particular boat or the venue but I would love to sail with 5 people on board on some boat that's around 35 feet long, that behaves well, and is very, very even with the boat next door. and go out and fight.
That's a good answer. I mean, I would have been surprised if you'd said that you would go laser sailing.
I love my time in the laser, and you have to understand that when my kids started sailing in the boat, I got an extra boat because I'm taking them to events. They weren't old enough to drive, and they're going off to race, and I was like, well, I might as well have one too and just go play. And the first day that I'd been in it, and it had been, 25, 30 years since I'd been in a laser, I was like, wow, this boat's so nice. It's so fun. It just goes along. Of course, once you start working really hard, it beats you up as well. But it was a real pleasure to sail in the boat. It was just lots of fun.
We have all sorts of listeners on this podcast. Some of them just starting out on the road to professional sailing. What's been the secret to Ed Baird's success? What's your biggest learning, do you think?
I think probably the biggest thing for me is not feeling like I had to focus on getting to one place. It was more about the journey, not so much about, which point we were trying to end up at. And so I've always enjoyed learning, meeting new people, finding ways to tackle new challenges, and just, evolving with whatever was going on around me. And that part, I think for a lot of people can be lost. People say, oh, I want to be this, or I want to accomplish that. Okay, that's great, but there's a lot of ways to get there. And really, you want to just be, in the sport, you want to just give yourself an opportunity. You may not be the best at a certain thing, but you might be really good at something else. And you will only find that out by exploring.
You've also done it with some amazing people. I'm going to read something out for you, which is something that Brad Butterworth, I got in touch with before we did the interview. And he said this: so when Russell left, I needed someone I had history with and I respected. Ed is one of, say, 5 guys in the world that can sail any boat close to perfectly. He has that skill with a great tactical mind, and he is one of the best sailing coaches around, an asset for any campaign. A pretty nice thing to say.
Yeah.
He's a Kiwi. I'd never say it to your face, but he wrote it in an email.
You are so correct. No, that is really wonderful. And of all the people that I've raced with, Brad and I probably have more just natural history and what's the right word? We know how each other think really well. And, so that's a great thing for him to say.
You're still delivering on the racetrack, but when you do look back on, everything we've talked about, all you've achieved, how satisfied are you? Oh,
incredible. Yeah. I mean, I talk to my kids all the time who are in the sport, and they're like, oh, we want to accomplish that. We want to accomplish that. And I said, if you look for just ways to improve every day, the accomplishments are going to come. And that gives you great satisfaction that you improved every day. You don't have to say, oh, I have to win this event or I won't feel good about myself. That's not important. What's important is that you got better every day, and the next time you go, you're even more confident with what you're doing. And so they've been approaching things that way, and they've been doing pretty good. So it's nice. It's been just a wonderful ride, and a lot of incredible people, as you say, and it is exciting for the next 40, 50 years here.
Ed Baird, World Sailor of the Year, America's Cup Hall of Famer, America's Cup winner. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley.
Ed Baird, ladies and gentlemen, some great stories. And for those of you into match racing, some real nuggets to think over, and ending with some pretty good advice there as well. A big thanks, everyone who I reached out to researching Ed's questions: Brad Butterworth, Tom Burnham. Thanks for the input. It may have been a bit harsh reading Brad's comments to Ed, but praise like that from someone with Brad's experience is a real mark of Ed's talent. Ed, sorry for springing that on you. So that's it for this edition. The summer of sailing is about to get underway, so keep listening. If you're enjoying what you hear, support the pod. It's super easy. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast and do your bit to help us bring you these uninterrupted ad-free chats from the biggest names in the sport of sailing. Before we go, big thanks to Tim at Vertigo Films. I do say it every month, but making the podcast is a lot of work, so I'm saying it again. Tim, a huge thanks for all your hard work. Keep in touch via social media. I'm Shirley Sail on Instagram and X, and Shirley Robertson on Facebook. And let us know where you're listening and what you think. That's all from us this month. Thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1.
Castle 1. Cassie, we've got to go right hand in. Copy that, copy that.
That's my drive and turning.
Max speed straight ahead. Perfect angle. Perfect angle. Perfect angle.
Still gaining on the lay line there. Gaining on the lay line there. All boats are below us in the box.
Hey, the spoon here, guys. Good pressure this way. Good pressure this way.
We're looking at 10-5s at 42. 5s at 42. This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.